Hello and welcome to the big picture. Every day, political parties in this country have started creating news, and many at times the wrong kind of news. Ironically, when a bad news from one political party is flashed, the other political parties watch and comment with glee, only to find that the next day it is their turn to have egg on their face. This slanging match apart, almost every political party in the country seems to be going through an existential crisis of sorts. At one end is a serious crisis in Andhra Pradesh for the Congress party, and today in Karnataka also. At another end is the BJP with its tallest leader questioning the credibility of actions or inactions of its leaders. The left parties, which are yet to recover from its defeats last year, are faced with internal problems in both Kerala and West Bengal. Navin Patnaik, whom one thought was an unassailable leader, finds himself questioned. And many such instances continue to occupy the media space every day. So today we are looking at all this and asking the question, why are the Indian political parties caught in a crisis? To discuss this, I have with me three very experienced and interesting analysts of Indian politics. Mr. B.G.Verghese, the veteran editor and commentator who started his journalistic career in 1948, training in Glasgow Herald in United Kingdom, and has been a witness to the making of independent India during the last 6 decades or more. Prof.Zoya Hasan, Professor of Political Science in JNU and author of many books on Indian politics, and Bharat Bhushan, a senior journalist who has also been a keen observer of Indian political scene. Welcome to all my guests. First, let me go to Mr. Verghese. Mr. Verghese, what we are seeing in Indian political parties, can we call it as some kind of a catharsis which is happening?
Well, I think they're all trapped in a crisis because I think these are parties which have a rank and file, but there's a dissonance between the party, the rank and file, and what politics in India should be about, the issues. And I think leaders are there to lead the party.
Right.
And they think that the rank and file should follow them,
Right.
rather than being the other way around, that they should be led by people and actual demands on the ground and giving direction to the aspirations of the people and the working of the constitution. I think this has got lost. And the social dynamics of India has got lost. So people are in power only to perpetuate themselves in power and for pelf and to criticize others and retain office, but not to perform.
Okay. Zoya, I think Mr. Verghese has set that tone for this debate today. I'll come down to a specific instance of Advani's, if we call it criticism or catharsis of his own. Do you see it as a positive development that such a big leader is now telling his people that, look, don't get too excited. Don't think that the UPA is in disarray. Even if it's in disarray, we are in no better position. Do you think it is a positive development within a political party?
Well, I mean, at one level it's positive because he's taking a critical approach, but on the other hand, it is motivated by his own personal frustrations.
And ambitions?
And his personal ambitions, which have been thwarted. So he thinks he has been sidelined within the BJP. So to that extent, it's not something positive. But I think significantly, the BJP was one party which until recently had a certain ideology, right, even if it was an ideology that many of us disagreed with. But nonetheless, it had a certain ideological position. But right now, even the BJP is, like most other political parties, focused on leadership, and leaders have their own personal agendas and personal ambitions. So I think that, and
there was a time,
BJP,
as Mr. Verghese rightly pointed out, there was a time probably in BJP where what was happening at the rank and file was being heard by the leadership. Now you think in BJP also there are no more such dialogue happening between the rank and file and the leader?
Beyond the BJP, I don't think the crisis is only that of the BJP. As you said at the outset, it's a much more general problem with political parties. And I think the issue, of course, there is this one issue of relationship between leaders and rank and file. But the basic problem with political parties, if I may say so, and which is responsible for this crisis, there are really three issues. One, I think, is a complete lack of vision. none of the political parties seem to really spell out their vision.
Right.
It's only when you have a vision that you can really mobilize people and expect the rank and file to support you. Second, I think there's a complete absence of internal democracy in most political parties.
Absolutely.
And three, I think one of the biggest problems, with the exception perhaps of the BJP, is that political parties have become very family-centered.
Right.
There's family politics, dynastic politics that seems to have become the organizing principle, not just of the Congress party, which of course is most famous for it, but that seems to be particularly true of a large number of regional parties which are leader-centric and family-centered.
Okay. Bharat, so political parties, as three issues which Zoya has raised. One is lack of vision, the second is no internal democracy, and the third is family-centric politics. These, except maybe the left parties. In fact, she said BJP is an exception, but if you go to the states,
left,
they are
it goes without saying that it's not.
They are not an exception anymore. So only the left parties are still left out of this, as far as family-centric politics are concerned. But they have a vision, but that vision has also got blurred as far as the left parties are concerned.
Probably, but to Zoya's list, I will add one more factor, because she said essentially lack of vision, deinstitutionalization,
right,
and third, family control.
Right.
Fourth is parties being controlled by people who are unelected or unelectable. So left parties are controlled by party apparatchiks who never fight elections. The BJP is controlled by a group of geriatrics in khaki shorts sitting in Nagpur.
Right.
So then, in this context, to criticize Advani, I think is wrong. Advani, it's absolutely fine for political leaders to have personal ambitions, to start a debate which may be prompted by their own ambitions, but don't bring it down to ambitions alone. I mean, who appointed Gadkari? What is his performance as a party president? Why was he given an extension? Who decided it? So, elections may be there, but they become a formality. You have to have a patron in Nagpur who decides, or a group of patrons who decide how the party will behave. So, if Advani is raising these issues, I think these issues need to be addressed in their broader framework rather than reducing them to Advani's personal motivations.
Okay, Mr. Verghese, would you like to add to this? What the present controversy within the BJP about what Mr. Advani said and things like that. Is it something which is a welcome thing? Bharat thinks it's a welcome thing.
Well, it's good. It's certainly good that Mr. Advani said what he said. I have considerable disagreement with much of what Mr. Advani says, but here I would go along with him. But I think the BJP is torn between two sets of thought or ideology. One is the Hindutva, mobilization of a smaller group and maximize that. That was during the days of Ayodhya and so on and so
right.
forth. That is the RSS thesis. The other is a more liberal view, which has rightly concluded that you can maximize the Hindu vote, but you'll never win Delhi. At best, you'll win some provinces. And therefore, unless you're a more inclusive party, you cannot hope to rule India. So they've been shuttling between these two and got trapped by their own rhetoric. And this is a path they are trying to steer through. Mr. Modi now represents that Hindutva, the exclusive kind of ideology. There are others who are probably inclined to move away from that. But then the problem is, as you said, the leadership, the ambitions of leaders and the negativity of politics. Everyone is not looking on their own strength, but the weakness of the other party. Your strength is the other fellow's weakness.
In fact, to be fair to Mr. Advani, in fact, that is what he was trying to point out to his party, that, you're all looking at the weakness of the UPA or the Congress and things like that. You're not looking at our own strength, which is not much. So, to that extent, Mr. Advani has started a debate which not, as you rightly pointed out, is not confined to only the BJP. It's a problem of all political parties, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, yeah.
No, please continue.
Yes, I mean, we are talking about the BJP, but look at the kind of
Congress party, for
look at the
instance.
crisis the Congress is facing.
Absolutely.
In fact, if there's a party which epitomizes right now the problems that we have identified, which is including the fourth problem that
Yes.
Bharat identified, unelectable or Rajya Sabha type leaders, I think the Congress is an epitome of that. I think it has reached its most extreme, I would say, in the Congress. And in a certain sense, I think the problem really is that most political parties now are completely focused on elections, on strategizing to win elections, marshalling resources, and mobilizing money. And elections have become so hugely expensive that the whole focus now is simply on winning elections and getting into power. So the kind of politics that we have, and elections is fine. I mean, we after all have a democracy, and it's an electoral democracy, so the focus on elections is understandable. But I think political parties have lost touch with people, and they're not engaged in political mobilization. They are not connected to political movements or social movements or civil society. And so I think there's a gap between political parties, between politics and what is happening in civil society and so on. And I think this is a major issue, and it's certainly a problem with the Congress. It is probably true of most other political parties as well. And now and then there's a Bharat Bandh, which political parties organize. But I don't think a Bharat Bandh can really substitute for active political mobilization, which is essential for contact between parties
Mr. Verghese,
and people.
What is this kind of political mobilization? If you go back, let's say 40 years, 50 years in this country, were political parties different than what they are today?
They were, because there was a carryover of the independence movement and that whole nationalist sentiment, the aspirational goals of building India. There were different models. There was the Gandhian model, there was the Nehruvian social planning model, and so on and so forth. But that was there. And alternating were the other views of breakaway groups, which then led to the formation of other parties and of the left. That is all gone. I think politics is opportunistic. You say one thing, you make election promises, you do exactly the opposite. And no one is bothered about that. The dichotomy between what you say and what you do. And the Congress party, for instance, swears by secularism.
Right.
But it's as communal as anybody else. There's vote bank politics played every day. Our secularism has been hollowed out. And this is shameful. Some do it openly, some do it more subtly. But the end result is the same. So I think we're trapped in that situation. And I think one further point I would make is that India is changing. It's not the India of the 40s, 50s, 60s. The disempowered mass is getting steadily empowered, and they have new urges, and they have a great urgency. Then they're not prepared to wait. They want instant remedies because they say, we've been waiting in the queue for 1,000 years. Deliver. You can't fob them off with mere promises. You have to perform. Now, there's a gap between all the promises made and the idealistic talk and performance. And that is because of vote banking and, as Zoya said, trying to win the next election, amassing money, and badnaam karo the opposition.
Political parties have become electoral machines. That's what Zoya is saying, and we have noticed it also in the last couple of decades, or more than couple of decades. They come together during the elections, they perform, win or lose or whatever it is for whatever reasons, and then they go back to their thing. Political mobilizations don't happen. But you tell me, and Mr. Verghese is now pointing out how the parties were in the past and how they become. The empowerment of the new sections of large sections of society is also added to it. But what is the role of the people themselves? What is it that they expect from political parties? Do people really expect anything from the political parties?
Let me first say that this emphasis on big issues and mass mobilizations, throwing up political leaders, that era is over.
Right.
But that is not to say that politics per se is over. Politics has moved to other spaces in society which political parties are unable to tap into. For example, environmental movements are political movements. Movements against big dams, against coal mining, against displacement because of big projects. They moved in the RTI sector. Are RTI activists just hold on a minute, but you're not tapping leaders from those areas.
Exactly.
And you could tap, new leadership could come from these non-traditional political areas which political parties are not tapping into. they're not tapping into because political parties have become groups of vested interests.
Right.
Where you are not bothered about the people, you're bothered about yourself, your family, your son, your wife. And for example, people say Mulayam Singh Yadav had enough family members, he would have fielded everybody in the UP election. Okay? Congress is a family-oriented party. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari, you have family-oriented parties.
Naveen Patnaik now is facing the trouble.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is there is politics happening in this country with which political parties are completely disconnected. And this is an untenable situation. There are people who are moving politically, who are mobilizing politically, but they don't find any representation, any reflection in legislative politics. This disconnect will lead to a crisis, much bigger crisis than the crisis of just political parties.
Right. We need to go into a short break now. Please keep watching. It's a fascinating discussion. In the second half, we will also look at how these political parties can tackle this problem if it ever can. Please keep watching. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. We are discussing what is the kind of crisis being faced by the political parties in this country. Mr. Verghese, coming to you. Bharat tried, made some interesting points, finding new leadership. Among these new the kind of movements which are happening outside the political parties, those people have to come into the. Let us keep that aside for a moment. Let us see the problem of a political party. For example, in Andhra Pradesh, the Congress party said that the son of the former chief minister, they resisted making him the chief minister or bringing him to the limelight. Then what happens? The party breaks, he goes away. So now, on the one hand, the political parties are being told don't indulge in dynastic politics. When they try to do that, they get themselves caught in a crisis.
Well, I think the issue goes deeper. I think one of the problems I think we talked about, and Zoya referred to the fact of elections, electoral money, the corruption and all the problems that engenders. But before and even prior to electoral reform, we need political party reform. A political party is not defined in the Constitution. What is a political party? Anybody gets up and says, I am a political party. I don't get I'm not nominated a candidate, so I break away. And I form my own party. And therefore, you have this alphabet soup. Congress, into bracket A, B, C, D, F, G, BJP and JDU and all those things. What is a political party? And the internal democracy aspect, these are all secret societies. They have no internal democracy. They have no accountability for the funds they raise. They have no membership register. You say you represent the people. Who do you represent? At the time of elections, like a paratrooper, somebody drops there and says, here I am.
Absolutely.
I'm your candidate. They've never seen the fellow before. If he's not adopted and doesn't win, that's the last they ever see of him.
Yeah.
Now, this is complete nonsense. And the way it's done, nominations to the Rajya Sabha, you've got a famous film star and a cricketer whose contribution to politics will be absolutely zero.
Absolutely.
One of them has not even taken the oath during a first session,
Right.
has played commercial cricket.
Right.
Now, if this is what you reduce your politics to, what can you expect? And this is to win votes.
Zoya, what is a political party in this country? He raised a very fundamental question. What is a political party in this country? Nobody seems to have taken serious note of it. We've still not, after 62 years of Indian Constitution, we've still not defined what a political party in this country is or should be.
Well, it's party reform is certainly important. Party organization is important. But I'm not sure whether you would be able to really define a political party, because there can't be political parties can't be defined. Political parties can be defined by their ideology, by their policies and so on. For example, if you look at political parties in the United Kingdom or in France or the United States, I think they have a party system which is quite organized, it's cohesive, you have few parties. Here, one of the problems, apart from the issues that Mr. Verghese has raised, is that there's such a multiplicity of parties. And why do we have a proliferation of parties, and I think the proliferation has to do with the kind of parties that we have, and also because political parties really don't have an ideological agenda or a policy agenda. For example, in the United States, even though there are only two parties, there are major differences even on the issue of health reform or health insurance.
Absolutely.
There's such a major difference between the
Here
Democrats
we don't have
and the Republicans.
policy, on question of policies, there are no
Or
differences in
even in
political
the last
parties.
elections in the United Kingdom, there were such significant differences between the Labour Party and the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. Within the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, we know that there are differences even on leadership. Even the two brothers, Ralph Miliband and Edward Miliband, there are differences. One is said to be a little more to the left, the other is said to be more centrist. So, there are when I think Mr. Verghese is talking about definition, I would think that when definition has to be definition in terms of thinking, in terms of ideas. You see, one of the big problems with Indian political parties is that there is really no big idea today.
Absolutely.
Political parties simply don't have ideas. There are
It's
no
all
major debates.
Personality based.
There are no major debates in
no
political
major
parties. That is one of the big issues, and there are no ideas and no debates because there is really no vision, and for that reason there is no accountability.
Bharat, you've been Mr. Verghese has also been editor of various newspapers. You have also been editor of debates. How much has media contributed to what Zoya is saying, that there are no big debates in this country, big ideas in this country? Is it that the media has also been to a certain extent responsible for this? We are concentrating too much on petty things. Advani accuses Gadkari accuses third person, Sonia Gandhi is attacked by somebody. Is that what debates in this country has turned out to?
Yeah, I'll just answer that. But let me first say, I don't find it difficult to define political parties. Okay, as a journalist, I know political parties are a conglomeration of interests within a broad ideological framework. So then I know this is Congress, this is BJP, this is CPM. It's not as if they all look the same to me. Okay, so you can define them descriptively. It is also wrong to say that there are no major differences between political parties. If there were no major differences, would the CPM and the left parties have left the UPA one on the nuclear issue?
Yes.
It's a big issue.
FDI in retail, for instance.
Absolutely. Would Mamata Banerjee have stopped FDI in retail? Would she have stopped the Teesta Accord? Would the DMK not have been able to force this government to take a stand against Sri Lanka in the UN Human Rights Commission? So it's wrong to say. This is drawing room talk that there are no big issues, there are no big differences. There are very big differences, and there are big differences even in visions of political parties. As far as the media is concerned, where I agree with you is that the media today is controlled by people who share the dominant perspective of the state, not necessarily of the party, but the dominant perspective of the state, whether it is neoliberalism, on whether the market can take care of the poor, whether you need social safety nets, etc. On this, the dominant media, that is the big papers, their editors, their owners, are on the same page as the managers of the state. So to that extent, media prevents debate. Okay, but that doesn't mean there isn't debate. There is debate going on in smaller papers through other fora. So that is also media. So there is say category 1 media, let's say in urban areas, in big cities, which is with the state, and there is category 2, India 2 media, which is not with the state and which is raising a lot of other issues.
I think Zoya needs to counter what you said. There are no big ideas. He says there are big ideas.
No, I'm saying there's a difference between big ideas and there being differences between parties. You see, obviously the left is different from the Congress when it comes to economic policy. But the fact of the matter is that even left parties, when in government, as in West Bengal, for example, for 35 years, in terms of the kinds of policies that they were following, were not very different and this is a phenomena that is a worldwide phenomena. After the neoliberalism and economic liberalization and globalization, there's a lot of convergence between political parties on matters of economic policy. And I think that is true in India as well, as indeed it is true in the West and so on. But this doesn't mean that there are no differences. Of course there are differences between political parties. You can even today differentiate between left and right. But I think by and large, when parties, you see parties take one kind of stand when they're in opposition. They
Absolutely.
take a different stand when they're in
that
power.
I
And
think
that is where the convergence arises
absolutely.
when they're in power.
That is the point which Mr. Verghese also earlier made, that we as a people also don't hold the political parties to responsible for what they say or not say, right? Is that also a problem of the people, Mr. Verghese?
Well, people, in a sense, also are confused because politics at the grassroots is one thing, drawing room politics that is played out and which appears on TV, etc., is another thing, and the real politics of the day gets lost.
Right.
And the trivialization of politics that we see in the media and the public platforms is what takes over. And I think that is very unfortunate. But this has also led to a danger, the disenchantment with politics and politicians.
Right.
And with the Anna movement, whatever its other virtues were completely off track by condemning politics as a whole, to say this is all nonsense.
And branding all politicians.
And politicians. And the other is people saying the only way to do it is hunger fast. Somebody is fasting to save the Ganga, somebody is fasting for the Lokpal, somebody is fasting. This is all emotional blackmail. And we give in and succumb to all this thing so that there's more of this sort of extraneous pressures that are irrelevant to the main issues of the day. And take the Bharat Bandh.
Right.
You say it's a hardship on the common people. Bharat Bandh has imposed a tremendous hardship. There are daily earners who, if they don't earn during the day, don't eat that night. Who is talking about them? And who is the petrol subsidy going to? It's going to the fat cats.
Absolutely. So last, just this question, all three of you, I want. What do you think the political parties in this country are capable of reforming themselves? Quick, all three of you.
I think they certainly are. I think many of the younger cadres begin to feel the pinch because they have the future to look up to. The old people are looking about legacy and maintaining their position. So I think they are deeply concerned. And they, being closer to the people and their own generation, feel the pressures and pulls from below.
Okay, Zoya.
I think they're absolutely capable of reforming themselves, but there has to be greater public pressure. Okay. And I think that is also something that we need to have more public pressure on political parties, because when the public pressure comes, it's more for, again, on the part of the public for a personal agenda or getting tickets and so on and so forth. But you really need public pressure to make political parties accountable, hold them to the promises that they make during elections, and absolutely make sure that they actually implement those promises.
Bharat.
I don't think these political parties can be reformed. I think these political parties will have to die a natural death. You'll have to set up alternative political parties, because the vested
new leadership,
new parties, new forms of organization. Because I don't see the Gandhi family giving up its family interests in the Congress and reforming itself. I don't see Mulayam Singh Yadav doing it, or the Abdullahs doing it, or Karunanidhi doing it, or Naveen Patnaik doing it, or you name whoever you want to name.
Banerjee.
I don't think these people will give up their interests. You need to set up new political parties. And my greatest regret is, and I've mentioned it to even Team Anna members, is that why on earth did they not transform this political energy they had unleashed into a political movement, into a political party?
Okay, we are completely run short of time, but it's an interesting way to end. In fact, Bharat, recently we had Prashant Bhushan on one of our shows who gave a hint that they are thinking of getting into politics. So we'll see how it is, but political parties in this country, they need to reform themselves, but Bharat Bhushan is very, very pessimistic about it. Let us see if we can find new political parties in this country. Anyway, this debate needs to continue. It can't end here. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. B.G.Verghese, Zoya Hasan and Bharat Bhushan. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on The Big Picture.